Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and rolling solo today, the day after the Sacramento Kings selected Iowa's Keegan Murray with the 4th overall pick in the 2022 NBA draft, and was quite a day yesterday. The plan is kind of just to go through what yesterday looked like and obviously the results of it and where Sacramento kind of needs to go from here. I think it was a disappointing day for most of the fan base. I was pretty disappointed, admittedly. I think a lot of the media in the draft room that the Kings kind of set up for us were disappointed with how everything ended up playing out. I will say by the end of the night / this morning, I had found something that I was okay with, I guess. I'd found my silver lining in the way that, I feel good about this. And we got to talk to Monty McNair last night as well. Throughout this episode, am going to kind of be maybe presenting conflicting points, but really what I try to do is separate. There's my opinion, which I'm going to give all the time on here, and you'll be able to tell when it's my opinion. And then there's what I think the Kings are trying to do, or what the goal is here, because just because I disagree with something and a majority of people disagree with something, or they're going opposite of consensus, doesn't mean they're guaranteed to be wrong. I think that the Kings have their logic in this, even if who knows how many other teams actually would have taken Keegan Murray at 4. I think the Kings have their logic, and I think that it can be presented in a somewhat understandable way. So just starting with Murray, and let's start with pick number 4. The expectations going into the night: Sacramento owns pick number 4, 37, and 49. And early in the day, pick 49 gets traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for the rights to Sasha Vezenkov, who is currently playing in the EuroLeague, and he was on all EuroLeague first team last season. Actually, he is 6'9", and actually 26 years old, about to be 27 in August. But he's got great size and shot 37% from 3 last year on 4.2 threes per game in the EuroLeague as the leading scorer of their team. His team also, just fun fact, Tyler Dorsey, Quincy Acey on that team. Kind of going through film, you run into Papagiannis, and it's an intriguing league to watch, and often talked about as the second best league in the world behind the NBA. And I mentioned that he was the leading scorer on that team because 37% doesn't do him enough justice for how good of a shooter he is, I think. I was really impressed by Vezenkov. Impressed in the way of hey, maybe he can make it on an NBA rotation. It's not like they're getting something crazy here. I don't want to come off as I'm overhyping some second-round pick. I think it could be okay value, and if it's people will say, oh, well, if he was so intriguing, why didn't the other teams bring him over? He was originally drafted by Brooklyn, and then he was a part of the James Harden trade that also had things going to Cleveland since they gave up Jared Allen and that whole complicated deal. So then his rights went to Cleveland, and now they have moved on to the Sacramento Kings. I think that a potential reason that Vezenkov never came over to the NBA, if that is his goal, was that he didn't really come into his own and emerge to be the player that he kind of has became in Europe until these last 2 seasons. And he just signed an extension, I want to say last year, maybe year prior. Sorry that I don't have that specific and for sure right in front of me here. Just signed an extension with his team, and the final 2 years, which I believe is this season and the next year, do have an NBA buyout in it. Don't know the specifics of that number, and don't even know if Vezenkov has any interest in coming over to the NBA. We tried asking Monty McNair about it last night. Didn't really get a great answer. He seemed like he liked Vezenkov, so maybe there's something there. But, my point. The Kings, I think, have a potential role for him. Potential. he's a star in Europe. And like, again, I don't want to come off as I think Vezenkov is some crazy, like he's going to change everything. I just think he maybe could be nice. And reality is the Kings' backup fours right now are Trey Lyles. Is Chimezie Metu going to be around? Mo Harkless. There's a chance that he could be an okay backup for the Sacramento Kings. If he's, I don't know, maybe. But certainly not really affecting, I think, the way that anybody is looking at the draft, or just maybe he works out. Who knows? I think it's an interesting flyer. We'll see if the Kings actually end up bringing him over, and hopefully we get some clarification on that soon. So then, as we are going into the draft, there's so much talk about this number 4 pick, and that's where the draft starts, allegedly, right? That the top 3, we all know who's going top 3. We thought we knew the order was the idea, and then Woj kind of fixed himself, I guess. And then they ended up going in a different top 3, and I'm not going to lie, I got a little excited that Chet or Jabari would be a real possibility, and that maybe one of those top 3 teams would pick Jaden Ivey. Obviously, that's not the way that it ended up playing out, and Sacramento sitting on the clock at 4. Everybody is thinking that they're probably going to trade the pick. At least that's where I'm at. I guess I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I think that was kind of where it felt like most people were at in the media draft room there. And then the name Keegan Murray comes in, and got the update just like everybody else, obviously. And I think it was not expected. Like, my thing is I was ready for fireworks, to be honest. I thought that this was going to be a crazy day for the Kings. I had told friends beforehand, like, man, there's going to be a real big shakeup in the league on draft night. Like, I don't know that it'll necessarily be the Kings, but I think there's going to be some major trades. I think the Kings probably do something, but we'll see. Really, no substantial trades happened on draft night for any teams, including the Sacramento Kings. And I think ideally the Kings would have taken Keegan Murray, if that's their guy, which it seems very much that he is, outside of maybe some guys in the top 3. I think that if the Kings really liked Keegan Murray, that ideally they would have traded down and gotten additional assets while still securing Keegan Murray. Because allegedly, like the Detroit Pistons, who were sitting at pick 5, really like Jaden Ivey. And you're in a position where it's like, well, we're going to take him if you don't move up here. But what if Detroit is like, we like Ivey, but we don't like him all that much more than Keegan Murray, that we're willing to give up an asset to move up to go and get him. So you take who you want, and we're going to be just fine with either of the guys sitting there at 5. I don't know if that's how it played out, but it doesn't seem like Detroit thought that Jaden Ivey was going to be on the table at 5 based on how all their post-draft pressers and all that went. It seemed like they thought somebody was going to trade up to 4 and take Jaden Ivey before he would be available at 5. So the issue is, I think the Kings loved Keegan Murray. That's not an issue, but I'm saying the issue with trading down and still acquiring Keegan Murray. The issue with that, in my mind, and again, this is just kind of me laying out what I think potentially could have happened. I have no clue. If they didn't want to lose out on Keegan Murray and thought he was substantially better than other guys on their board, then trading with, say, the Pacers at 6, who move up to 4, let's say I wouldn't have done this deal. Obviously, the Kings wouldn't have done this deal because apparently it was offered, according to Jeremy Wu, of Chris Duarte and the 6th overall pick for number 4, right? Say the Kings accepted like Malcolm Brogdon and number 6 or something. The Pacers move up to 4. Let's say they take Jaden Ivey. The Pistons are just going to take Keegan Murray. And then the Kings are sitting there, and apparently they don't like anybody else that much. Like, that's the impression that I'm getting here. And that's why I think they didn't move down. I think they genuinely love Keegan Murray. The issue here that is kind of complicated is just like that the Kings didn't get that much access to different prospects throughout this process. Keegan Murray and Jeremy Sohan were the only two that said that they were in contact with the Sacramento Kings during the process when they spoke to media within the last week. Like, I think the Kings had a really tough time getting people in their building who were considered lottery picks because maybe agents have bad relationships with the Sacramento Kings. Like, there's some people that, I don't think that there's a handful of players that I'm sure you can think of throughout the last couple seasons that maybe them and their agency feel like the Kings kind of did them wrong. So therefore, anybody else under that agency, I don't know if I want my guy to go there. And the Kings are probably trading the number 4 pick. Like, I don't know if we don't need to go there. Or my guy probably isn't going to have a great success rate if he goes to the Kings. Like, if I'm a draft prospect, to be honest, why would I want to go to the Kings? Why? At the top of the draft, like, looking at the history of this franchise, they have not put their players in a position to succeed. That could be starting to change, but that's just the reality of what this is. And I think that from the outside looking in, it's like, why would people want to go to Sacramento? And they're just... So, the fact that maybe they didn't get the opportunity to fall in love with some other prospects that they could have traded down for because they didn't have all these in-person interviews is interesting. Now, when Monty McNair got asked about this in the presser, the lack of availability that they had, and I do think that part of this is maybe that the Kings could have put more time and effort into actually having meets with these people and having conversations and workouts and things like this. But Monty McNair's response was that, we do our due diligence for it doesn't start once we know we have the number 4 pick. Like, we've been doing research on this draft. Our scouts have been doing research on this draft for years. Some of these guys years now. We've been going to games. Fran McCaffrey, who's the head coach for Iowa, said that they've been scouting Keegan Murray for a long time and very in depth. And again, Keegan is one of the guys that they really did talk to. My understanding is just Keegan Murray and Jeremy Sohan during this draft process. But they also talked to Keegan Murray, I believe, prior to this process. And just they did such a in-depth job with Murray that I think the point being, like, there's access to all of these guys year-round, so there is a lot of value in getting to talk to these prospects. It's very telling that the Kings weren't able to get a conversation and workout with a lot of these guys, and I think that that is just a product of the organization being looked at as not the best way, understandably so. So I think that that's what makes this Keegan Murray pick complicated, is that did they even get enough opportunity to fall in love with these later guys to seriously consider trading back? And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that we're ever gonna know. Like, I kind of try to let go of things because I think it's probably better for my mental, and that's just where I'm at. And the second that Keegan Murray is confirmed as a member of the Sacramento Kings, I'm excited to have Keegan Murray. I shouldn't say the second because it takes me a second to process and make sure, like, so they're not trading anything. Are we sure? Blah, blah, blah. But by the time I get home, like, man, I'm going to love Keegan Murray. The entire fan base is going to absolutely love Keegan Murray. And Monty McNair and the front office love Keegan Murray. I think that it's unfair that Keegan Murray is going to have Jaden Ivey's name attached to him for the rest of his career. And, I mean, I'm very guilty of thinking that they should have taken Jaden Ivey. It's going to, like, I'm going to be looking at Jaden Ivey and thinking, man, Sacramento could have had that. Like, again, I think that Jaden Ivey was the pick. If it was me, I would have taken Jaden Ivey because of reasons I've laid out here on the Kings Herald, on the Kings Beat podcast with James and Sean, on ESPN 1320, D'Lo KC, is that the Kings' only opportunity to get a star in the NBA, pretty much ever, is through the draft. So, I think they need to take a swing when there's a potential star on the table. Because when do you get another chance? And I think that Jaden Ivey has the potential to be a star. I don't think that Keegan Murray does, to be honest. I could be wrong. This is just my opinion. I know I will say a lot of people share this opinion. I don't think that the handle's there. I think there's a very serious lack of self-creation that was shown from Keegan Murray during his time at Iowa, although he obviously scored his ass off and was the leading scorer on one of the best teams in the Big Ten, the best team in the Big Ten. He was absolutely phenomenal. But I just don't see how he's a self-creator at the NBA level. He's going to be a very, very good NBA player for a long time. And the Kings need more really good NBA players. Lord knows they need another starter, especially with size at the wing. So I think that the Kings, I kind of look at it as poor asset management, poor value for the number 4 pick. But it's a weird draft. It sounds crazy that, like, it's a big difference between Jaden Ivey and Keegan Murray, and they're taking it 4 and 5. And I think Murray was seen as probably the likely guy to go at 5, even if Murray went 4. So, like, people are like, oh, there's only one pick. Like, what's the difference we're talking about here? I do think the ceiling is very, very substantially different between the two. So I get why it was probably, shouldn't say probably, I could see it being extremely complicated to move the number 4 pick and still love what you're getting back. I think that they were probably trying to trade the number 4 pick because they knew everybody else loved Jaden Ivey, and they were still really about Keegan Murray. I'm going to play Monty McNair, a little bit of Monty McNair's presser from last night after the draft when he spoke to media, and he kind of speaks a little bit about Keegan Murray and what he thinks he brings, and just pay attention to how you can hear Monty McNair, like, really, really likes Keegan Murray. And it sounds like the rest of the front office does as well. And I'm telling you, the entire fan base is going to love Keegan Murray. He may not be a star, but he's kind of what the Kings need. Maybe not what you would expect from a number 4 pick, but it's going to be hard to not like Keegan Murray. And here's Monty McNair when we talked to him last night about Keegan Murray in the draft.
We certainly value all the information we can get on these guys, but I would just point to, like, ultimately, like I said, this is not just like the last few weeks that we're sitting in that room. Our scouts have been out there all season, and for some of these guys for many years. We've seen these guys in college, even high school all-star games, things like that. So there is just so much information out there now. Certainly the more touch points we can get, the better on guys, but really once the time for the draft comes around, we have so much video, intel, seeing these guys live, talking with people who've been around them, that we feel comfortable with the person and the player of these guys to a pretty high degree by this point.
Yeah, Monty, Keegan Murray has gotten a little bit of a label of a low ceiling, and I'm curious what your response is to that and what you view as kind of his ceiling throughout the NBA.
Yeah, it's funny. I won't name names because the NBA probably would not like that, but I would say go back and look at some guys who people thought had low ceilings, and I don't know how you would say that about a guy who led the country in points scored, who, like Tony said over here, had the steal, block, rebound numbers that he does. I think Keegan in the Big Ten, the best conference in the country, being one of the most productive players all season long against some of the toughest competition. We don't see it that way. We think Keegan has an extremely high ceiling. We think he's going to come in here and prove that to everyone. And, I'm sure he's excited, and I'm excited to see it.
Can you talk about a little bit about his dynamic features that he has? Kind of list them if you could.
Yeah, I think Keegan was. I'm going to get the stat wrong, but his dunks one of the highest dunk rates for his position in college. A fantastic transition player. We talk about wanting to play fast here. And certainly that's something that we can emphasize, but we also got to get players that can do it. And we know we've got a few of those on our roster already, and Keegan's another one. I think he is very smooth with his game, and maybe that lulls people to sleep, but a guy who dunks the ball, runs in transition, rebounds the ball, blocks, steals, all these things indicate a dynamic player with athleticism, with skill, with all those things. So I don't know exactly why people see that. Maybe those are some of the reasons, but we feel confident in not just his production, but his dynamism.
Yeah, I mean, take that for what you will. I do think they really like Keegan Murray. You never know how much is lip service. Maybe it's just that they were not going to take Jaden Ivey. I can say that much. I thought if Jaden Ivey's name was called, I was fully expecting that there would be a follow-up tweet later in the night that by the time you reached pick 11 or 16, there would have been something else because he was getting traded elsewhere. That is obviously not what ended up happening. I don't think that the Kings were willing to take Jaden Ivey. And I think that has to do with his fit on this roster. And specifically with Darren Fox. And Sabonis to an extent. It's more of the fit of him compared to the fit of Murray in my mind. Like, Murray is seamless with this Kings roster. Like, the definition of what they need. Maybe I should calm down. Maybe not the definition, but he fits really damn well. Length and shooting, right? What did Darren Fox say at the end of season presser last year that the Kings need? Length and shooting. Well, Keegan Murray is 6'8" and just shot almost 40% from three on 4.7 threes per game. And also, by the way, 55% from the field when he's shooting almost 5 threes per game. And the 23.5 points. There was 8.7 boards. And the steals and block numbers that Monty McNair seems to love here and his staff, 1.5 or 1.3 steals, and 1.9 blocks. I don't think that he's quite that level of defender. And I will caution people that if you watch Keegan Murray highlights only, you might get misled a little bit. And it's just not the same as watching a full game of Keegan Murray. Like Monty said, he's smooth with his game. Maybe that lulls some people to sleep, but he gets it done. So when you watch the highlights, there are some that they're legit highlights. Like they pop off the screen a little bit, but just know you don't get those all too often. I think when you will get them and where this team is really going to be a force is transition. Like we already know, and Monty McNair says in that clip that I just played, I believe, that they are still planning on playing a pretty high-paced offense. I mean, they have the fastest player in the league with Darren Fox. I think Domantas Sabonis fits that really well with being able to get boards, put the ball on the floor himself, and hit those outlet passes in transition to Fox or say Keegan Murray. And Murray has a good speed to him. I think that his acceleration in his first step is just a little bit lackluster. It takes a sec for him to get going downhill, but once he's going, he's got a head of steam. Then he's a really good finisher at the rim, and he dunks a lot. It was interesting to me that McNair did point out his dunk percentage. I like that, being able to finish plays, and that's really what Keegan Murray is. He's a play finisher. And the Kings need more of those guys. Like, they have their play creators is the idea. I think this is, in my mind, the idea. They think they have their play creators. Darren Fox, Domantas Sabonis. They don't really have play finishers. And those play creators can't be fully optimized without finishers. Again, my issue with how this is handled is that you can find play finishers. It's a whole lot harder to find those play creators. And yeah, you had a chance to potentially get... Anyways, don't need to get into it. I'm fully on board with the Kings taking Keegan Murray. They're going to love him. I have no issues with that being the pick at 4. It's not what I would have done. I doubt that they would have been able to trade down and still keep Keegan Murray. But I really get it. Like, if Fox and Ivey don't work great together, they're not optimizing one another, then what ends up happening with Sabonis? And then maybe you end up restarting. And I honestly don't think that'd be the worst thing. But I understand why that's not somebody whose job is on the line, why they're not willing to go that way. You know, I got asked, I forget when it was, but like, what would I do? I would take Jaden Ivey. And it's like, well, what would you do if your job was on the line? I don't know. That's a different story. And I think that's the reality of where we're at with Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox in this front office. The one thing I do want to point out in that McNair presser, he says that it was a unanimous decision between him and his staff that Murray was the right pick. Wow. Are you really? Like, I don't know about that one. I don't think that anybody even expects for all of the front office. There's a lot of people in that room to think every single one of them, yes, this is the guy. Like, I think it's very healthy for the room to be split and for both sides to be presented and then being able to pick between either or. I see why this could have been a split decision. I honestly don't see how this was a consensus. And I kind of think that this is, my guess is that Monty is not trying to have, can you imagine if, like, I guess he didn't need to say the consensus because we wouldn't have heard otherwise, but the whole, like, oh, we know other members of the front office wanted Jaden Ivey, so, and it's like, some people could overblow that. I think it would have been totally healthy, and I don't think McNair needed to say that it was a consensus among the room. Honestly, I don't believe it. I just don't think that's a healthy room, and I think it's good to have varying opinions. So I would guess that it was actually varying, and I think that's a little bit of lip service by Monty McNair. But moving past Keegan Murray, because once the Kings make that pick, again, I can justify that to myself. Not what I would have done, but I could justify it. Actually, I'm going to stick on Murray for 1 second longer. I think that now we've seen 3 first-round picks from Monty McNair. We can notice a little bit of a trend at this point. That every single one of those guys that he's taken, Tyrese Halliburton, Davion Mitchell, and now Keegan Murray, are all players that were viewed as having a high floor. That's for sure. And maybe a low ceiling, by the way, when McNair says in that quote of, look back at some of the players who had the label of a low ceiling and tell me how that went. One of them was Tyrese Halliburton, and I think that's already changed. The other difference or similarity between all 3 of these, and a trend that we can pick up on now at this point, they're all talked about as amazing people. And I know that's not the most important thing. Like, you're trying to win basketball games. Winning fixes everything. They have to be good. Like, I don't give a damn if he's an asshole, if he's out there kicking ass and winning games. Like, great. His teammates care. And I think that this is where I ended up settling. They all are extremely good people and talked about as just great to be around and ridiculously hard workers. If you look at their development path, all three of them, at some point during it, they had outlier growth that people didn't see coming that took them to another level. And I think what's happening here is that the Kings are their type, in my mind, at this point, is the guy that's already really good and he works his ass off. So he'll probably get even better. I'm not 100% on if that's the right way to go about things. And again, I'm not 100% that's the way they actually view it. But to me, I think that is kind of what I'm piecing together with all of this. And look, we're going to have to see the jump that Davion makes this year. I think that is one of the big telling points to me of okay, we hear about your work ethic all the time. I absolutely believe it. I think that Davion, they have to lock him out of the gym. Let's see the progress. Because you're a bad three-point shooter last year. And you have to be a good three-point shooter to play on this roster alongside Fox and Sabonis. If he wants to eventually be the starting two or starting one, if you want to say De'Aaron's the two, he's got to be able to shoot well. And if this crazy work ethic is going to show in any sort of way on court progress, then we're going to see it going into the next season after an off season, because he's got so much time to put work in. So, maybe there's another level of Davion Mitchell, and maybe that's the same way they're viewing Keegan Murray. I could see why maybe I'm crazy for saying that this 22-year-old that just put up the numbers that he did has a low ceiling, because I would be happy to be wrong, and there is a lot to like about Keegan Murray. I think that there just needs to be another step of outlier progression for him to reach an all-star. But is the fact that there's outlier progression previously in his history mean that it's even more likely to happen again? I don't exactly know. I think they're buying into work ethic, character, and just guys that are already good at basketball. I think there's the players that are athletic and have all the talent, but the skill and IQ is lacking a little bit. All three of the guys Monty's drafted, athleticism is kind of doesn't seem to be a priority. Not to say Keegan's not athletic. I think in the open court, again, head of steam. He is athletic. I think he does have a decent bounce to him. And he's got a really good lateral quickness. I think that he can guard kind of 2 through 4, 5 even, maybe 3 through 5. I think he's a very good on-ball defender. Did a really good job on Johnny Davis a couple times throughout this season, who ended up going to Washington, who's a smaller guard. I think Keegan Murray is pretty impactful on the defensive end. But the other thing that stands out to me here with Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox front office taking these type of guys, and also you look at Mike Brown, I think that they are very focused, and this is going to sound obvious, on changing the culture. And if you put yourself in the player's shoes, and I'm going to do Darren Fox for this, because there was reporting that Darren Fox was pretty unhappy going into the beginning of last season because Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley were still on the roster when they did not want to be. And the thought was that they were going to get traded in that offseason prior. I thought it would happen. You probably thought it would happen. I think everybody thought it would happen. And same with Luke Walton, by the way. And I think De'Aaron Fox, or if you're a player on that team, you go into practices and you kind of see, you can just tell, these guys don't want to be here. And I don't want to talk bad about anyone's personality or anything. Everyone's different. I don't think that Buddy and Bagley handled that situation well. I don't think that they're guys that in that specific situation, which to be fair, I don't think that Sacramento did them any favors or anything like that. I don't think that they're guys that if you're their teammates, you're particularly enjoying playing with. And I think Fox was frustrated that it was probably another year I shouldn't speak on how Fox is feeling. If I was in those shoes, I would be really frustrated that it's like, really, we're going to just be sitting on these guys and waiting for the best value and throwing away a year. And these guys do not want to be here. And this became infectious on the rest of the roster that, like, I'm not going to lock in because that guy doesn't give a shit. So if I go all out and he's only going 50%, my all out doesn't even matter because this is a team game and his guy just got a free backdoor cut and all my 15 seconds of perimeter defense, not that the Kings actually had 15 seconds of perimeter defense this year, but keep up with me, did not matter because they still got a free basket at the end of it. I think that you can look at this roster and paint a picture of guys who are all hard workers and I'm really pitching the cheesiest shit ever here. Guys that get along with each other. Like, there is a lot of value in enjoying your teammates and wanting to see them succeed and vice versa. And wanting to succeed for them. Like, look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Every single guy that goes out there is giving 1,010% because they're all doing the same for one another. Like, if that guy's giving everything, what the hell am I doing if I'm not? And I think the Kings are kind of building a roster of guys that are all going to go out there and like, all right, let's bust some ass and let's do this. Like, I think that everybody could be on the same page next year. Again, there's a decent chance I'm talking myself into this because if I recorded this pod right after the draft last night, I've got to tell you, it probably would have been pretty negative. But I do think that there's a way that the culture is changing here with honestly, Buddy Bagley leaving and a Davion Mitchell coming in, a Domantas Sabonis coming in, a Keegan Murray coming into the roster. I think that Darren Fox very much so knows that it's kind of now or never. Like, all right, let's turn it on. It's time to do this because this is your 6th year, I believe he's going into. And people are kind of thinking that 25-7 that he had was a fluke. And personally, I think last year was the fluke. I think that the people that were annoyed that maybe, if it is true, that reporting that he was upset coming into camp, that Buddy Bagley was still there. And then so maybe he was just out of it. And I think you could see that in the pressers at the beginning of the year and the way he was talking about things. He looked a little disengaged. I could see why that's annoying for the fan base and people. I also get it. Like, if I'm Darren Fox, I'm pretty annoyed in that situation too. So I get it. I think that really did affect him last year. I think he played really well with Sabonis in those 15 games, and you saw him have a little bit of a different light to him. So really what I'm selling myself on with Keegan Murray, Mike Brown, Davion Mitchell, Fox, Sabonis, like, I think that all of these guys are going to work their ass off and want to play for and with one another. And there's a crazy amount of value in that because that's part of a reason why some teams overperform. And then you look at a team last year like the Sacramento Kings where maybe there's some internal issues. And for that reason, they underperform. So I really am talking myself into the Kings are rolling guys out there every single night that are smart players, that are giving them an opportunity to win on most nights. Like, I don't think the Kings are going to be so drastically out-talented that they just have no chance to win games. And that's maybe makes me a little bit of an outlier, but I think that they're putting together a roster of guys that are good cultural fits. Not fits, because if you're fitting into what already exists in the Sacramento culture, I guess that's not a good thing. But they're good guys to bring in when you're trying to change the culture. And I think they're putting a whole lot of value in that. And I think that's important because these guys all talk to each other. If somebody leaves Sacramento and it was a shit show, they're telling other people about it. If someone's considering a free agency, like, oh man, I don't know, should I go? There's other people, other players saying like, no, dude, you're wasting your time. You're wasting parts of your career. And it's not like it's enjoyable there either. Like, I think it could be different. You could slowly start to change the narrative if it's like, no, man, those guys all really enjoy playing for each other. They play their ass off. They have a chance to win every night. And you just kind of slowly start to change the narrative. I very much worry that the roster is not talented enough to get out of the first round this year, or I guess next year, the year after that, without really substantial improvement. But what was I talking about at the beginning? The Kings couldn't get interviews with guys. They couldn't get in-person workouts. Like, maybe if you were respectable, and even if that means just what I laid out, being a team that actually plays their ass off and is in the play-in tournament, then maybe it's different. So I guess the way that I am accepting this pick, because they didn't go with the upside, is that I do think that Keegan Murray is somebody that can be part of a really good culture, and I think that the Kings are continuing to build that. The issue with the rest of the night really goes beyond Keegan Murray, to be honest. The 37th pick that the Kings owned ended up getting traded to the Dallas Mavericks for their 2024 and 2028 future second-round picks. The 37th pick ended up being Jaden Ivey, who we all saw on TV in the draft room, which I thought it was pretty funny that, of course, the Kings picked the last guy that is still in the room at the draft, and he gets to go up on stage with big purple and Kings logos behind him and put on a Kings hat. And you just already know that pick's traded and can see how this looks horrible in the future, because Jaden Ivey coming into the year was talked about as a potential top 5 pick, and then he goes to the Ignite and really was shit, to be honest. But he only played 12 games, shot 30-something% from the field, under 40% from the field. He was really bad. But the potential's there. It's the 37th pick. Like, get him in your program and just slowly work him along. Like, I just don't see what the risk involved is. Like, if they had questionable intel on his personality or felt like the storyline of him was going to get in the way and they don't want all this extra shit to get in the way of their season, they're so focused on like a good culture, right? And not having all this extra shit. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. I think that there were other guys also at 37. I think it could have been E.J. Liddell. I think there's Wendell Moore. There's a couple guys that were really interesting to me there, and that feels like a waste. I don't like. Are they trying to? Is it that they didn't like anybody else? Anybody? So then they went for 2024 and 2028, like 2 second-round picks that might not even be around to use. That one makes no sense. I genuinely do not understand, and hope we get the opportunity to ask Monty McNair what is going on with that. We weren't able to at last night's presser because it had not officially been through the league offices, so we weren't allowed to talk specifically about that move. That one was a shocker to me. And it's, I guess, just a second-round pick, but, like, second-round picks pan out. Like, heard Keegan Murray talk about how he compares himself to Chris Middleton, which I don't know that I love that comp, by the way, but Chris Middleton was a second-round pick. Like, there's guys that are valuable second round picks. I know the Kings never seem to get them, but they're out there, and they probably would eventually, and you're definitely never going to get one if you don't try. And it's not like the Kings already have all their depth in place. So maybe it's I don't even know. I was going to say roster spot, but they have spots. Maybe you want a roster spot open for trades or something. I genuinely do not know. The pick 37 trade made no sense to me. Like I said, I'm kind of treating this process as there's my opinion, and then there's what the logic that I feel like I can present for the way that they went. I don't know how to explain what they potentially could have been thinking for the 37th overall pick and going and trading it for 2024 and 2028 second round picks. And they traded him to Dallas. Like, yeah, it's your competition in the West. So that's concerning. And then we talked about 49 for Sasha Vezenkov. Outside of that, Richaun Holmes not being moved was disappointing. I think that on draft night is a big opportunity to move on from some of these guys and be willing to, just pick up some assets, some draft picks, and kind of take advantage of the situation that's going on and try to call around and move around some of these players that you really like. And Richaun Holmes is the guy to me on this roster that if he is still on the team at the beginning of next season, I am not going to understand it. Because this will, again, we've seen this in pasts that Monty McNair did not like the offers that were on the table for Harrison Barnes at previous deadlines. So instead they've just kept Harrison Barnes. That's fine. What if he ends up walking at the end of this season for absolutely nothing because he's on an expiring? Monty McNair didn't like any of the offers at pick 4. What if Jaden Ivey, who he wasn't willing to take, it seems, he is really that guy? Maybe he's not, but he could be. Bogdan Bogdanovich. I think that there was a potential deal there when they were thinking about signing and trading, and it just I think that there is a trend here of Monty holding on to, and Buddy and Bagley being the primary two. They, like I said, came into last season. They were not supposed to still be on the roster, but Monty McNair did not have any deal on the table that he thought was good enough value for those assets. And that kind of caused them to throw a whole year away. So I know Richaun Holmes is not the same. Like I said, I think that Buddy and Bagley probably didn't handle that situation amazingly. I think that if Richaun Holmes, even if he wanted to be moved, which I would imagine is the case, I think Holmes deserves more than 13 minutes a night because I don't see them playing too big him alongside Domantas Sabonis, and Sabonis is playing 35, so 13 left for Richaun. I think that he's better than that. He deserves more than that. I think that his contract is a good value, and I think that it could be viewed that way around the league as well. I don't think that Monty can sit there and say that they're in a position where we're just going to hold on and wait because we don't like that deal enough. I don't know. It's hard without knowing the exact offers on the table, obviously, but I really do think that move probably could have been made last night if the Hornets were potentially interested in Richaun Holmes. Like, could you have gotten that 13th overall pick that they ended up sending to Memphis? I personally really liked AJ Griffin or Tari Eason, who is still on the board, but those are two project players, and it doesn't seem like the Kings really want to look in that direction, to be honest. Maybe they weren't considering that, but instead Charlotte goes and picks up a center with Mark Williams. We just saw Dallas, another potential landing spot for Richaun Holmes, when got Christian Wood. Maybe they think that those guys can play together, and Richaun Holmes is still a potential landing spot, but who knows? Toronto is the only one left that I can really think of. And there's probably others that I'm blanking on, and even Toronto went and got Christian Coloco from Arizona, who's a big man. Maybe that doesn't stop them from being interested in Rashawn Holmes, but it's like the longer you wait, the more these other teams that need centers are going to figure out an answer. I think that he eventually needs to be moved on from, and in my mind, it needs to happen before the start of this season, because the Kings have to be a decent basketball team this season. I think they will be. I actually think that this team wins. I mean, it's hard to say because actually I'm expecting probably another substantial move. But I think like roster as currently constructed is like flirting with 38 wins. Like, I know that doesn't sound amazing or anything, but like the one Jaeger year that everybody talks about, they got 39 wins. Everybody was super excited at the potential of 40, and that was a step in the right direction. I think that this season they won't be looked at as a joke, because last year, dude, if I'm on a different team and the Kings are coming up, like, this is an easy one. Like, to be honest, the Kings were horrible last year. They gave up all the time. They didn't play for one another. The team chemistry on the court was horrible. They couldn't shoot for shit. They didn't play defense, and talked about how the transition game was the best thing they had going for them. It's like, well, you're not going to get in transition if the other team's making the shot every damn time and you can't get a stop. I think that they got a decent defender in Keegan Murray. They can put out a lineup that all of a sudden, and I'm saying this as somebody who's been deprived of defense, and I love defense. I like defense more than offense in the NBA, so take my word with a grain of salt here. But they can put out a lineup that's Davion Mitchell, Dante DiVincenzo if he returns, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. All of a sudden, I'm like, shit, that's a defensive lineup right there. And Mike Brown's calling out Darren Fox, not calling out, but pointing out in his presser, like, I think that we can be a solid defense, improved. And he's like, I remember there was a time when I saw Darren Fox prior to him in the NBA, and he was damn good on defense. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but he specifically said, I remember Fox being a really good defender. And Fox is in the room right there. Like, I think that if everybody can buy in and there be some sense of laughing because I really am selling myself on this. Selling myself on the cheesiest shit ever. But if everybody can be on the same page and obviously all trying to win games, and that is the primary focus, whatever it takes, there's not people having extra motives and things like this. I think the Kings can be respectable. And honestly, while this is far from the way I would have gone about this, I think that a roster is slowly getting formed that is making them respectable. I know it's a low-ass bar, but, like, I guess you got to climb out of that first. Could it be too short-sighted? I think so. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, if they get to that step of the play-in and maybe they win one, lose a second, or make the first round and get swept, whatever, like, that is progress. That takes the stink off, I guess, because 16 years doesn't turn to 17. But if you don't make it again the year after, then it just becomes, oh, well, I haven't made the playoffs 17 out of the last 18 years. So it's got to be sustainable, and I think the Kings are potentially, what I'm getting from their draft process is that they are willing to bet on guys that are already good, that have good work ethics, that those are the guys that you want to have on your team. Every single player that Monty's drafted in the first round, Tyrese, Davion, and Keegan Murray, are players that every single team, and like, not hyperbolic, literally every single team in the league would be super happy to have on their team. And for good reason. They all are smart players who play hard, work their ass off. And they're good people. And maybe the odds they're playing are, instead of going for these crazy upside guys when they don't work, that maybe there's a little more ego going on, or feeling a type of way because maybe a player thinks that it's the org's fault, not theirs, and blah, blah, blah. These other guys, like, there's a chance that, like, one of them, like Tyrese, for example, that one of the low ceiling guys actually ends up being a lot higher of a ceiling than I thought or anybody else thought. And if one of them becomes that, like if Fox and Sabonis are actually the all-star caliber next year, Mike Brown, and having an entire season of the same coach in Mike Brown compared to this Walton Gentry thing that was going on last year. Jeez. I'm officially rambling and probably going to close out here, but I guess this kind of gave you a little peek into my thought process throughout this whole thing. I don't think that this was the right move. The Kings have so much more to do. This isn't enough. Far from enough. They need to go and trade Richaun Holmes. And what's going to happen with Dante DiVincenzo? I would assume that Trey Lyles' team option gets picked up. I think 2.6 is very reasonable price. Will they fully guarantee Chimezie Metu, which will be interesting because all of Mike Brown, Jordy Fernandez, and Luke Laux were on the Nigerian national team with Chimezie Metu. So curious to see kind of their opinion and the way they go about that process. The Kings still have a lot of work to do and need to add some depth to this roster. They have pieces to do it, but last night was a night that typically, on the night of the NBA draft, you're able to make moves easier than you would throughout free agency and the time after in the offseason. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Far from it. The Kings absolutely still can add more onto Keegan Murray, and at this point, I have sold myself on, at very least, I think I'm going to really enjoy watching this team play. And I don't think that, last year sucked. Last year was a shit show, to be blunt. Like, it's just what it was. There's guys throwing up courtside because the play is so disgusting on the floor. I don't know. I think at very least, again, I understand this is a damn low bar, and it's probably me coping, and you can hear me going through the stages in this podcast. I think that they're going to play hard and be a collective unit. I think they're going to play hard together and for and with one another. And I don't think we've seen that. Again, might be just talking myself into this, but that's where I'm at right now, a day removed from the Sacramento Kings taking Keegan Murray with the 4th overall pick. I get it. I don't get what they did with 37. 49 is fine. I hope that they actually bring Sasha Vezenkov over and use that pick on somebody that they thought was intriguing and could make an impact. He fits their type, a high IQ player that can shoot the shit out the ball, and is in his prime. So he fits their type. In my mind, I think it would make sense to bring him over. I hope that they do, and that trade wasn't just for the $1.75 million that they also got in return from Cleveland. They have a lot more to do, though, the Sacramento Kings, that is, because it gets complicated when you start looking at the rest of the Western Conference. I can sit here and say they're going to give themselves an opportunity to win every single game, but when it comes down to it in the close minutes, like, are they going to close out? San Antonio Spurs came out of this draft with 2 really high upside picks in Jeremy Sohan and, why am I drawing a blank? Malachi Branham. 2 really high upside picks, and the Spurs are already rubbing shoulders with the Kings. If either of those guys pans out, maybe this looks a little bit different. The Portland Trailblazers went out and added Jeremy Grant for a 2025 Milwaukee first-round pick, by the way. Really not that much at all. A pick that they got because they traded away C.J. McCollum. And maybe if the Kings had like moved Harrison Barnes previously or other assets, that they would have had an extra first-round pick that they were comfortable moving, because I would guess that, I wouldn't want to give up one of Sacramento's future first-round picks for Jeremy Grant unless it had some pretty kind protections on it, and maybe that just didn't do it for Detroit. Like, the other teams around them are really solid too. So while I think that the Kings are going to be substantially better than they were last year, it's coming from a really low starting place, and it's going to be interesting to see how it progresses past next year, because I think next year could be a great feel-good story because the team is competent and respected again. But they just got to keep progressing, and we're going to have to see how that goes. Keegan Murray, newest member of the Sacramento Kings, and we're going to get to talk to him with his introductory press conference with Monty McNair tomorrow. I'm recording this on, Jesus Christ, I don't even know what date it is. On Friday, the 24th at night here, we're going to get to talk to him at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday, the 25th, and kind of get a little bit more of a taste for Keegan Murray's personality here. And it'll be interesting to kind of see how this goes and the rest of the process, because the Kings absolutely needed to do more. I was not happy with the way the last night went. So I guess this pod might have a little bit of a different tone because I've had some time to settle down. Settle down's not the right word. It's not like I'm sitting there heated and pissed last night or anything, but kind of try to be like, okay, what are they seeing here? And this might be the way that you get back to respectability and have a team of guys that all like to play with one another and get the most out of everybody. So that's what I'm going with. Keegan Murray, I think, is going to be a really damn good player. I'm going to love Keegan Murray. I think that you're going to love Keegan Murray. I think all of the fan base is going to love Keegan Murray. And glad to have him. He's very much a player that the Kings need. They just need a couple more. And it's disappointing that didn't happen yesterday. Doesn't mean it can't still happen before the start of the season. So we're going to have to see how the rest of this plays out. It's going to be interesting. Summer League is not far away. I believe the California Classic is on the 3rd and the 4th. I really hope I'm not getting those dates wrong with you guys, but that will be at the Chase Center, the California Classic this year. And I will be there as media with obviously all the other Sacramento guys. I'm excited to kind of get that whole process started, and Summer League's always a good time. They're just building out their roster today and kind of going through all that. I'm going to hold off a little bit on some of the potential guys that are joining that roster. I guess I will real quick touch on Keon Ellis, who is apparently getting one of the Kings' two-way contracts. And Keon Ellis is a 6'3.5" guard from Alabama. And Keon Ellis is a really good defender. Off-ball defender. I think he's a solid on-ball defender as well. Decent at navigating screens. He's a playmaker on defense, like a disruptor. He averaged, in the 30.9 minutes he played in his senior year at Alabama, he averaged 1.9 steals per game. I think that he's a really smart defender who rotates well and has really active hands. He was listed at 6'6" for most of the season, and that's why he was hovering around like late first, early mid-second, I think, on a lot of mocks and big boards. And then once he measured at the combine at, I believe, 6'3.5", that kind of slowed people down a little bit because, he's not a wing, he's actually a guard. And offensively, while Keon Ellis is impressive on defense to me, specifically off ball, like I said, good rotations, active hands. I think he's a very smart defender. Offensively, he's just a shooter. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, he's a really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. Last year, he knocked down 36% of his 5.5 per game. 5.5 is a crazy number. A year prior, he's only taken a little less than 2. He's knocking down 38.9%. I think Keon Ellis is a really good 3-point shooter, spot up 3-point shooter. But I think that offensively, teams are just going to close out hard on him and could do an okay job of attacking closeout, putting the ball down for 1-2 dribbles, and then he's got decent finishing at the rim as well. But if he's ever asked to do any more than 1-2 dribbles, it's kind of a mess. Not a very good handle, and that's why maybe there's some intrigue with he's on the 2-way, so maybe there's some intrigue with a Darren Fox, or they need more point of attack defenders. And I'm still not 100% certain on if he's got to dive into his film a little bit more, but if Keon Ellis is more ideal as a on-ball defender or as a help defender, rotational defender, I guess you would say. But I think that the Kings need more guard defenders on their roster. So, I don't know. I don't hate it. I think that I could end up really liking Keon Ellis. But that's the 2-way that they currently have on their roster that they ended up adding. It'll be intriguing. And you know what? I'm certainly not going to be mad about a 3-and-D player, because that's exactly what the Kings need. And they went out and got a really damn good shooter in Keegan Murray, who plays solid defense. Keon Ellis, their 2-way guy, who, again, not all too much expectations, but somebody that I would assume we will see on their summer league roster, who could potentially be intriguing. I could see him being an NBA rotation player, and that's okay value. He was undrafted. I thought that, I guess after he measured in at the combine, going at 37 would have been kind, but it's almost like if they would have just taken this guy at 37 instead of traded for those 2 future seconds, that it wouldn't have felt as bad. And maybe we're overblowing never mind. It is what it is. Anyways, that is actually going to do it for me on this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast. Be hearing from me a little bit more as things kind of get back into a little bit of a news cycle and some excitement with around the team, because change is a-coming, and free agency, summer league, there's about to be a lot going on, and it should be a pretty good time. So I appreciate anybody that made it to this point of the pod. Anybody listening, we are on YouTube as well. I am on YouTube as well. I always forget to mention this until the very end, but you can definitely watch the podcast on YouTube as well. I post every episode on my YouTube, the Kings Pulse YouTube channel as well. So there's definitely that, and likes and subscriptions. I hate asking, but I get told I'm stupid if I don't, because they do actually help a lot. So if you don't mind, if you enjoyed, you could just, hit that like and subscribe, and definitely check out all the great work from all the guys and gals and friends of mine at the Kings Herald, who have done a phenomenal job covering this draft process. And obviously, by the way, there's a written profile by Bryant West, who obviously comes on the show often, of Keegan Murray, that people should check out. And that is on the Kings Herald as well, as well as whatever's going to be updates for these next couple days and weeks and seasons, even at the Kings Herald. So take a look at the site, obviously, and take a look at their Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. And you'll hear from me again in the next couple of days.